So we got a lot with this most recent update. Got a new zone, got some quality of life improvements, but we also got a new 11-star weapon. And what that means, it's time for math. Yo, what is going on, my fellow weebs? Colonel here, and welcome back to the channel. So today we'll be talking about the new 11-star, the Eredim weapons, and talking about just how strong they actually are compared with the weapons we have access to going into this expansion, update, new zone, whatever you want to call it. But before we jump into that, if you guys are new here, like mentioned, my name is Colonel. I primarily cover PSO2 content. Would much appreciate a subscribe as we work way towards that 10K mark, hopefully by the end of this year. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this. So, disclaimer, we do have to use the Visiphone wiki, and I have very much been someone who's championed the Visiphone wiki consistently. You guys know it's a good place to get a lot of great information. Unfortunately, it looks like the creator of the wiki, I don't think, is updating it anymore, and they're relying mostly on others updating it. Maybe it's a situation of not receiving enough donations to keep it up and running, or so on and so forth, or maybe life just changed and they're working on something else. Maybe they're not playing the game anymore. Who knows? But unfortunately, this information is not up to date. While they do have some up-to-date information, it is great. I think it's mostly relying on everyone else to keep it up to date. Thank you, Mr. Motorcycle, for making a ton of noise next to my window. But they are mostly relying on people keeping it up to date. And at the moment, there are some things that are incorrect that I did have to go through and kind of sort out myself. So maybe we'll be the ones to update it. So we do have the Iridium weapons here. We're going to talk about what they do and how strong they actually are. Like they said, that disclaimer, right now what you're seeing is the Iridium weapons at plus 90. Their value here is set for the max. However, the Wingard blades as well as the Zover blades are not showing their max value. These are their level 80 variants. I assume everything else is the level 80 variant, and these are level 90. This she doesn't even include the new weapons that replaced the Argenti weapons. So yeah, this is unfortunately just falling behind a little bit. Love that new wiki. Is it Daddy Juf, Daddy Geoff, Mommy Geoff? I don't know. Everyone always tells me I pronounce it incorrectly. Either way, so that's someone who's working on another wiki, and all the updates I've seen from it look fantastic. So fingers crossed it'll be ready soon, and we can go ahead and transition over to using that consistently. But I'll do my best with what we have access to, and we'll go ahead and talk about it. So Iridium weapons, how good are they actually? Let's talk about what they actually do. And for that, I have to move myself out of the way. Woo! All right. So the Iridium blades, or Iridium weapons in general, they drop with 3 EX augments. It's kind of like their big ticket thing. These EX augments are very, very powerful. We're going to talk about which ones are kind of the best, what I believe is the meta setup at the moment. But realistically, they're all fairly good. Just looking for a combination that's going to work well for you or that fits your overall play style more than absolutely going for the best in slot 1. Going for the best in slot 1 is fantastic. The best slot setup is fantastic, but it's not always going to work out best for everyone. In some cases, it might actually be a detriment when we get to that point. So with the blades, the potential reads as so. So we have 38% potency, critical hit rate 5%, PP cost consumption minus 10%, and photon blast gauge charge rate when attacking plus 5%. Pretty solid overall. It's pretty good potential. It does give us some extra crit rate. We get some PP consumption reduction, so less cost for PP when we're using attacks or techniques. Photon blast gets built up even faster, which photon blasts are actually really, really good. Getting those up even quicker has actually been pretty nice with the addition of how easy it is for us to get fix on a lot of our gear. We're able to get something like Fixa Orgus on our units. I can't pronounce a lot of things right. I think it's Orgus, whatever it's actually called, but the fix that increases our ability to build up our PB. That is something we can get on our units, and we can get PBs fairly quickly. And with how strong some of these PBs actually are, it's really nice to have access to be able to build them up even faster. So solid potential altogether. The biggest issue that I'm seeing off the rip right now is this potency being 38%, and you'll find that it actually hurts this weapon a lot more than you think. This 5% crit rate, while it's nice to have crit rate, it's actually not doing as much to help the overall. It's barely keeping this weapon afloat. So if you're here just for the should I build this weapon, should I not build this weapon, so on and so forth, here is your short answer. If you have a built Zover fully kitted out, or you were building as over and you can't afford another weapon. If you have a fully kitted out, even I would say a rare, funny enough, that most of your damage comes from PAs, which I feel like that's the case for most classes in the game. This is what I talked about rare beforehand. I'm pretty sure most classes, most of their damage comes from PAs, but who knows? I only play bouncer, man. We're the most broken class in the entire game, apparently. But if you're in that camp, it's a slight damage increase to go for Eredim. Not by much, but it's very, 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 very close, and you're not dealing with some other annoyances. If you're in the camp that already has a wing guard, even if it's not fully built, even if it's not amazing, I would probably still stick to your wing guard. If you're in the Flugel guard camp, I don't know what to tell you. Move on, maybe. I don't know. It's not nearly that bad. It's not really that bad of a comparison. Basically, these Eredim blades are about the same with all of those weapons. We're going to talk about exactly how close it is and how much of a difference it can be. And keep in mind, small percentages do seem fairly small, but these percentages are all multiplicative, and damage bonuses can get pretty freaking insane. So this is your warning. We're about to go over to the actual damage calculator. You're going to get flashbanged. While I can use things like the darken mode and things like it doesn't look right, and I don't want to make this difficult for people to read. So here's your warning. 3, 2, 1. All right. I'm also going to get myself out of the middle of the screen because I'm in the way. There we go. We're good now. So this is Cakewalk's damage calculator. Shout out to Cake, who actually hopped into my stream day of the update after a few hours of the game being live to say, hey, look, the calculator has been updated, by the way, with most of the new stuff. So if you need to go ahead and use it, feel free. Shout out to them. They actually stream now, which, Cake, you should definitely put your stream in here somewhere that people can find you and they can ask questions if they need to, or just find you to support you in general. Like, this is awesome. You put a lot of work into this. So if you're watching this video, put your stream somewhere in here. Like, put it right here, very top. Like, hey, also I stream. Come check me out here. I feel like that's totally fair. As many people as that use this, and I use it all the freaking time, so I'm gonna always show this. So if you've never used this beforehand, but essentially you can plug in all of your values, what you have, including things like add-on skills, and essentially you get out effective damage and damage comparisons. Very useful for people like me who want to do damage comparisons of new weapons that come out. You also have a Bandak replacer. So whenever you're looking at a Bandak, you have this to swap out everything. The type of damage doesn't matter. It's just potency in general is what we're concerned with, and potency floor. So that's not really all that important. You actually don't have to change this at all. This is the best in slot setup for Bandak. It's 20 unique augments, which is insane. And then this is actually a Fatale replacer. So when you're building for Fatale, you want to build at a certain point for just raw potency. Now keep in mind, building for raw potency is actually going to make you a bit squishier. Not nearly as squishy as you'd think, and we're going to talk about why here in just a moment, but you are going to lose out on some HP, and you do have some negative stats. I'm going to explain to you why those negative stats don't matter nearly as much though. So what's comparison we're doing? This is the setup we're going to be using. We're going with an Eredim weapon, no fixa. So we're going to start base and see how strong the fixes make us. But realistically speaking, when it comes to fixes, this weapon isn't affected as much by that 5% crit chance as you would think it is. If it was a higher amount of crit chance, then things like Termina would be more of a conversation, but there's nothing in augments that give you crit chance or crit damage. So the only thing that really is affected is something like Slayer in general, which just playing the class gives you more crit chance, making something like 5% crit a little less meaningful. That's really about it. And we'll do the Slayer comparison after this. So if you're a Slayer, hang in there. You're probably looking at my EX combinations like, what are you doing? I believe this actually might end up being the best in slot EX combination for those who just want pure damage. However, for you to get the most out of this damage, you have to be below 50% HP, which is wild. Even if you're not though, this is still pretty solid. Still 4.5%, so don't worry too much about that. I think it's gonna be a really good combination. At the very least, these two are actually really, really cool together. We talked about it in yesterday's video, the day before yesterday's video, where we talked about all the EX augments and how good this combination is. It basically turns you into a Guts Pokemon holding a Flame Orb. In every way you can think of, like every single way. It actually works one for one the same way. It's kind of crazy. Our augments are going to be the essential best in slot floor augments, or just augments in general, if you're not augmenting for pure potency. As you can see, we have Grand Dreadkeeper still here. This is the first augment that you would swap off going towards potency, in my opinion. But as it stands right now, this is pretty much going to be your best in slot setup. Some people opt to go off of Grand Dread Keeper and opt to go for some more potency, but it does make you a bit less consistent and your overall average damage does decrease. But that's law of large numbers. Maybe you're luckier and you just crit and you're better at the video game than everyone else. That's how it works, right? 100%. So that's what we're going to go with for all three units. And this is basically what you want to go with for your best in slot setup for your weapon. Gladius Soul, Lux Finale, Glangagus Mass Day, and then a capsule. Realistically speaking, you can of course substitute these out for the LC variants, losing potency, and then of course you want just any Anati capsule at all. Just get one. They're all very good. Do not use the XDs, not use the earlier ones. They're not worth it. Don't buy them. Don't spend money on them. Literally, even the cheapest Anati is better than the best in slot XD. So just don't do it to yourself. And we're going to go ahead and scroll over and take a look at the actual comparisons now. So as you can see, if we take a look at Flug, Rayar, and Zover, they're actually not far from Eredim. Why is that? Well, unfortunately, Eredim suffers from having a low amount of potency in its potential. It only has 38%. And even the Zover's got 41. And though it has less potency or less base damage overall, that extra bit of potency in its potential pushes it up even higher. Even if it has an extra 5% crit. Thing about it is we're getting more and more crit. We're getting things like Fatal at higher variables. We're getting a lot of these things from different places, and it's not as valuable as it looks at the moment. It also doesn't push, someone like a Slayer into like a better bracket or anything along. It keeps them from not being keeps them from not being totally useless, but it's not as impactful as it could be. I mean, if we were looking at maybe like 20% crit, 25% crit, it'd be a different conversation, but it's 5, not very much. And it's not going to do a whole lot for its damage comparison when it comes to these weapons. You can see that the Zover is just barely over it. The Rayar is just that much more over it, just barely for the moment being. And then when we start getting into other weapons or into fixes in general, in weapon combinations, you start to see that the gap does widen up a little bit and changes up a little bit overall. So let's take a look at something like Fatal. Fatal is pretty commonly going to be the best in slot choice for most players. If you are a ranger or you're playing a force, this is the wick setup. I'm going to go ahead and highlight it here. That way you guys can see what it is, because you can't tell. That's the Eredim. So your Eredim affixo wix 1 is an extra 7.88%. However, if you take a look at Rayar and Zover, you can see that 7.9 and 8.0, those are actually stronger than the Eredim, which is kind of crazy to think about. That potency really does hurt it quite a bit. Even in the Fatal build, it's not doing too. I mean, even in the Termina build, you would think, the extra crit damage, because it has a crit chance, would make it do substantially better, but it's not that far off of these weapons, right? Like, these weapons are suffering for sure, but they're within 1%, which is pretty bad in my opinion. To make this an easier comparison, I'm going to throw this up to something like Fixa 3. So let's bust up to Fatal 3. When we're taking a look at Fatal 3, we can kind of see some things do change a bit, right? We can see the Termina is a bit weaker here, and you can see that the damage disparities are not as big as they were beforehand, but they're still fairly consistent across the board. You're looking at Wingard, which is the pretty common comparison right now for these Eredim weapons. It's straight up gonna be Wingard at solo a 4% difference, 3 to 4%, and Wingard at a 4-player buff, or a 4-player group at the very least. Essentially, with Wingard, when you use your PB, you actually give a damage bonus to everyone attacking the enemy, so it's really, really nice. And this stacks up to 3 times. So in a party, of course, you're going to stack this up much easier. And this is only 50% uptime. So if you have more uptime, if you have access to getting more PBs, if you're in like huge mob fights and fight bosses, then mob fights and fight bosses, which you tend to get your PB a lot more often, or if you're into blast assigns, this uptime is going to go up, making this gap get even larger, which is insane. So what does that mean for how good this weapon is? How good is this weapon actually? At the end of the day, you don't have a Zover built, you don't have a Rayar built, you're not using a Flugel guard, sure, this is okay to go ahead and build. I never recommend building backwards in any situation, I'm recommend taking advantage the most of what's currently going on, especially since next week there's going to be a bonus going on to upgrade these Eredim weapons. However, if you have a Wingguard built, you're using your Wingguard, you have the EX augments on it, stick to the Wingguard. I feel like that was obvious, but it's a pretty sizable difference. If you're curious to yourself, like how good of a difference it's actually going to be, I know originally the number floating around was about 1 to 3%. The problem is that Eredim has such low potency on that potential. It's just not going to cut it overall. It's really not going to cut it over your Zober or over your Rayars, at least for now. Let's go ahead and look at Slayer as well, because I'm sure you guys are like, but what about Slayer? All right, so for the Slayer combination, we went ahead and we dropped Grand Dread Keeper and we dropped yall Domina. yall Domina I feel like is one that you could probably keep because it's 3% as opposed to like lower, but Grand Dread Keeper we definitely need to drop because it's 2.5%. And with how much crit chance Slayer has, it's just better for them to go hardcore into potency than anything else. First, we're back at Eredim fix 0. We can take a look and see what the comparison is here. So when we're looking at Eredim, of course, again, the comparisons are going to be a little bit more in favor of Eredim, the extra crit chance. That's going to synergize more with Slayer a bit. It isn't so high that Slayer is overcapping on crit, so it's not a waste, but it isn't so low that it's completely, useless. So essentially, it's going to be a damage bump for Slayer, no matter how you look at it overall. It's not a massive one, as you can see, like between Flugelguard to Eredim is a less than 2% damage difference. But as always, these differences in damage, while the 1 to 3% might be low, it's all multiplicative. So the numbers you're going to see are going to be massively different. And as we move into something like, let's say, for example, Termina, which for Slayer, you're always going to want to go Termina no matter what the situation is, you can see that they mostly hold roughly the same. And between 1 to 3% damage difference, roughly. It actually looks like it's 1 to 2% in this situation. But when we hit Wingguard and we hit, when we hit Wingguard and then we hit Wingguard with 4 players, you start to see a pretty big difference in damage. Of course, Wingguard 4 players, Termina buff being the absolute strongest that you're going to go ahead and get a hold of. So it pretty much holds the same even for Slayer, even with a 5% crit chance. Should you build it? I don't really feel like it's enough to push you to pass the Zover if you currently have one built, but to be perfectly honest, everyone's going to have to re-augment their gear anyway. If you're going to be setting up an EX augment and you want to set up the EX augments, they're insanely powerful compared to what we had beforehand. You're going to see a sizable damage increase, and a lot of the effects are really fun, honestly. Like it's more than just the damage. You actually can kind of tailor make your build to what you really want to do. So it's a lot of fun to set up. Overall, damage difference wise, about 1 to 3%, a little bit more depending upon the situation. And of course, as always, I recommend grabbing this calculator, plugging in your specific stats, plugging in your specific augments, and seeing what the damage difference is for you personally. If you're ever curious or ever need some help with doing so, feel free to jump into my Discord. You guys can DM me directly, especially if you guys happen to be one of the channel members or if you happen to be one of my subscribers. I'm more than happy to sit down with you and walk through it step by step. However, even if you're not, I don't lock that content behind having a paywall. It's just there's priorities that are put in place. So if you are, let me know. I'm more than happy to sit down and look at it for you. Otherwise, you've got the calculator. I'm sure Cakewalk is more than happy to answer questions. They also are in our Discord, funny enough. So if we do miss something, they will be the first ones to jump up. I'm sure Cake will mention something in the comments as well if there was something that was missed or something that needs to be corrected. And keep an eye out in the pinned comment in case there is anything that was missed or needs to be corrected. It will be posted there for you guys. As always, I'm super bad about doing outros. Let me know if there's anything I missed in the comments below. Like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you want to keep up with more. Let me know what combinations you guys have been getting on your Iridiums, because holy crap, these EX augments are actually a lot of fun to use and a lot of fun to mess around with. I wish they were a bit more comfortable to test overall with our weapons, but hopefully that system will change moving forward in the future. Anyway, take care, my friends. Peace out.